Hey guys, well welcome to this week's Brett's Property Rants. And so we've got the, actually it's a really good week this week for a number of reasons. For good news out for property, but also because just some of the stuff that I've been looking at now, I've been super excited about just the volume and the actual stuff you can get your teeth into, which has been quite interesting. So yeah, so hopefully we'll have some fun. And as the thing says there, unlimited cash or almighty crash. So that's going to be one of the topics that I'm covering today. And I'm talking about QE or printing money. So that's going to be our sort of main Brett's Rant topic today. And you'll see I've changed things around. Rather put it at the end, I'll put it at the start, because I think we need to start looking at this. We can't just look and just say, well, actually, we're printing all this money and just ignore it and say, look, house prices are going up. We've got to look at the long-term effects. So I want to introduce this, and we'll develop it over the next few weeks as I sort of delve deeper and deeper into different areas, whether that be shares and things like that, and the potential effect. Because I think it's interesting to know, and it's not just, you can be a property investor that just focuses on property and just has the blinkers on. But I think if you're really going to build a bigger and bigger portfolio, you need to start looking and understanding some of these key concepts, and that's what I'm hoping to give you. But you know what? Even if you're a beginner, it's good to understand these things, because otherwise you might have some fear around them. I'm also going to look at the IFM house price stats that I sort of pulled their report down. I like to pull a report down every week, and just from various people. I've had words with the IMF over the years. I'm not really that much of a fan of them. They are very US centric, and they are very, the US is great, and they're there for me. They're there to control other countries by lending money to them. UK house prices still soaring, mortgages tightening, but why? And I think this is the important thing, why? London property hotspot. And I think, I want to start now looking at a bit more deeper into the London market, because I think the London market will come out. It's always the best fundamental areas that come out of recession or downturn first. And I think London is poised to potentially do that, despite having affordability issues and things like this, and people saying, move out. And service apartments, are they dead? Yeah. And then finally, are virtual viewings the answer? Okay. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to get into today. So without further ado, we'll get into it. So guys, just before we start, actually, look, any comments you've got, chuck them into the comments section, and I'm happy to answer those. I've got some time for that, absolutely. Whatever that can be. It doesn't have to be on today's topic. It can be anything. I'm happy to spend whatever time necessarily to really get depth and drive deep. And even if I don't get deep enough here, by all means, send an email to webinars@gladfish.com, and I'm happy to have further discussions and all that sort of stuff, and do videos and special videos about it, all that sort of thing. Because what I'm really trying to get is good quality information out there for property investors. I'm sick of these special interest groups that really don't put property investors first, and people that are just trying to flog you property, by saying this area is great, that area is great, and all these sort of things. The reality is there's a lot of salesmanship in our industry, and you've got to learn how to filter that out. So hopefully that's one of my roles, if you like, in a custodian sense of the industry, So, but look, make sure you subscribe. That'll really help us out, and also like the video, So click that like, because that way, obviously we get better things. I can put more time and effort into actually producing these, and doing outside broadcasts and visiting and travel and that sort of stuff. Although not travel now, but yeah. So let's get into it anyway. So, unlimited cash or almighty crash. So right now what we've seen the money supply increase by about 30%. So if you imagine your total cash that you had in the economy was £100, that now is £130 due to coronavirus, because they've just been printing so much money. And it's not only due to coronavirus. To be fair, the US has been leading the way in printing massive amount of cash. They really have, and one of the issues, I think, are they kicking the can down the road? The first question that we need to ask is, where does that cash going? And I think that's an interesting question. So all this money going into the economy, where's it going? Well, it's going into inflate asset prices. Yeah. So shares, property, businesses, you look at your bounce back loans, you look at your CBILS loans and all these sort of things, and these handouts, grants from governments and things like this, okay? They're the things that are going in. And the amazing thing is, property, if you look at property, what's happening is people are getting these loans and they're buying property, yeah? Or people are, buying shares. So, these companies are getting, handouts and grants from the government. That lending, effectively, it's being printed into money, into real hard money, and given to those guys, and they're spending it to actually, prop up their asset. Is that a good thing? Well, you know what? If you're one of these guys that sits there and goes, no, you've got to have you can't have a fiat currency. that, you know, you can print as much money as you can, and that's absolutely going to cause a massive crash. And the longer we, you know, the further we kick the can down the road, the worse it's going to be. Well, we've been kicking the can down the road since, you know, 1970, when we come off the gold standard or whatever it was. And the reality is most countries have been, I won't say fiscally responsible, but reasonably well. The US, no, they've had the reserve currency, so they have been printing and getting into more and more debt. And they are sort of the, if you like, they're the custodians of the world finance thing, and this is where the IMF, I'm not a big fan of the IMF, but basically, you know, the US has been leading it, but now a lot of other countries have seen fit to do that. There's a lot of evidence to support that that is going to cause a massive, massive downturn, depression, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. Yeah. The other side is the sort of neo or new economics school of thought, which is actually a certain amount of growth is fine. And in fact, that's proven already. You know, printing some money as the economy expands is fine. It's the question of how much is too much. Yeah. And I always use it, you know, it's like the accelerator. Hi, Dr. A and B. So yeah, I use it as the accelerator, the manual car. You know, if you put too much accelerator in, too much in, you stall the car, you know, unless you pull the clutch out. So it's one of these things where you've got to find that biting point to come out and grow at a certain level. Because let's face it, we have to have growth. Our economy is set up for growth, you know, and it doesn't perform well when it's going down. It doesn't perform well when it's going massively up. It performs well when it's growing steadily, and they talk about that 2% as being the magical number. You know, is that the magical number? Well, you know, we'll see. But look, it is a concern that maybe we are just kicking the can down the road. But the interesting thing is the whole world is doing it. So then the question becomes, it used to be that, hey, simple to get, oh yeah, welcome to the show. I haven't seen you, both of you guys before. I think you're quite new. Awesome. So any comments you've got, guys, chuck them in the thing, and I'm happy to answer them as we go along. So look, bottom line is, are we kicking the can down the road? You know, who knows? You know, I know there's a lot on YouTube about, you know, the crash that's coming next year, and, you know, shares are inflated, and all these, you know, inflated values are going to come crashing down next year. But you know what? They've been saying this for 10 years. And, you know, and in fact, they've been saying it for even longer. In fact, if you go back to when I first learned economics, 25, 30 years ago, you know, this was the same story. And to a degree, yes, we have, you know, the swings and roundabouts, but we haven't had the almighty crashes. In certain areas, we certainly have, okay? And that's what you find is certain industries that are being disrupted and certain places that are being disrupted, they will get that. But, you know, for me, it's a bit of a balance, because I don't see it as always being, this is terrible. I always see this as, you know, there's two sides of the coin, and there's actions that we can take. So as we stand here, it's not a case of this will happen. You know, what's a case of is this could happen. It's a possibility, but by the same token, this could happen. Yeah. So you've got options, and it depends on how the custodians of the thing, the politicians and the economists and us as individuals, how we act and how we do stuff. Yeah. You know, so I think that's really the key here. None of this is set in stone. Yeah. Just because it happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in the same way in the future. Now, yeah, history repeats and all that. You know, I studied modern and ancient history at school, so I get that. But does it happen in exactly the same way? And have we been able to learn from our mistakes and mature? You know, I think modern economics is a lot different than, you know, what it was 25 years ago when I first learned it, when it was the study of scarce, you know, allocation of scarce resources. And it was pretty much, this is it, it's supply and demand, and it's a simple model like that. Now there's so many intricacies and so many different countries and globalization, you know, and all these sort of things that affect it. All right. So I want to have a look at these, some of these things. So basically, this is the IMF report, real credit growth over the past year. Now, if you have a look at that red dot is actually United Kingdom. Okay. And there's a few countries there. You can see, you know, to the right of the red dot is Brazil, Thailand, France, Colombia, Philippines, Australia, Korea, China, Hungary, and Turkey. Okay. And that means credit. In other words, there's been credit as people borrowing. But you can see there's some countries that are going negative. But, you know, if you look at it, you're talking like 5%, you know, with the UK, 6%, 5% for most of the European countries, and that are around about that 5% growth. Is that tragic? Is that going to be? Now, what I would say here is this report isn't necessarily going to include the latest figures of possibly the last 3 or 6 months, okay? But it's the latest figures from the IMF, so it's probably up to, I would say, about June, these figures. I think it is, Q2 or latest annual percentage rate, all right? So that's an interesting one. When you think about it, the credit hasn't grown that much, but I know from June, July, August, what's happened since then, because there has been a lot added to that, and that could be the determining factor, it's interesting times. Let's have a look at some more data. So this is the Global Real Estate Price Index, and this is all indexes. So this is all things. But if you have a look, that goes back to, 2000, and then 2000 is the base at 100, and then obviously we get up to 160, drop back down to 145, and now we're back up to 165, which isn't that much growth over 10 years. But my argument around this is, again, we probably, to a degree, kicked the can down the road, Real house prices over the past year. Now, if you have a look, the red one again is the UK, really hasn't grown that much. We're talking about 1%, if you look at real house prices, and this is to Q1, all right, this year. So this doesn't account for the 7% growth potentially that we've had in the last few So if you look at that, now some of the interesting things is if you look, say, Australia, it's way down the end, where they've had sort of 5, 6, 7% growth and that. But even 5, 6 or 7% growth, it's not about any one year. It's about what's the consolidated, over the last 5 years or 3 years or things like that. Because if you've got 15, 15, 15, that's serious. If you've got 5% growth a year, that's not actually that much. That long-term average is about what we expect. Another one, house price to income ratio. Now this is one for me. This is one of the issues, and it's largely misunderstood. 30 years ago when I learned economics, it was the be-all and end-all because there wasn't credit cards, there wasn't really personal loans, there wasn't really masses of household debt. So you had your mortgage, and pretty much that was the debt you had. Whereas now you've got all sorts of debts that you can have, and your mortgage debts, and you've got credit cards, and you've got personal loans and car loans and all sorts of borrowing for mobile phones, who knows. But you can see again the UK is sitting there in the middle of the rest of the countries, and we're talking about the actual house price to income is about 107ish, which isn't tragic or massively overthink. My concern is we need the income to grow before we can have massive house price growth. So, some of those stats, when you start looking at these stats, I get in the last 3-6 months we've had a massive, fundamentals, and I sort of just simply get it's almost complete collapse of the fundamentals. I agree 100% with that. It's really hard to tell what's true. If I was just to go back 30 years and look at how I was taught, and said this is what was going to happen, I'd be saying there's an almighty crash coming, But my experience in the last 25 years of doing property and playing the economics game and doing these sort of, these talks and all this sort of stuff is that actually that's not the case now. It's not a foregone conclusion. There is a lot of things we can do and governments can do to overcome that. Now, on a personal level, and if you come down the personal level, because I think this is the key here, is we can sit there and pontificate on all of these stats and all the things that should happen and on, neoclassical economics and new economics and, Keynesian, all this sort of rubbish and garbage. But the reality is, that doesn't make any difference to you in your situation. I think this is the key here. You've got to look at what it is for you. And I think one of the things is, look, I'm ex-scouts, which used to say be prepared, and ex-military, which was, you prepare for the worst, and then of course hope for the best, But that's sort of one of the things. For me, it is on an individual basis. You've got to look at, getting rid of debt, getting rid of credit card debts, and I'm not talking about necessarily mortgage debt that's covered by a property, in terms of rental income and things like that. But play the scenarios. What happens if house prices drop? What happens if you lose your job and only get it back at 70%? What happens if you can't, get another job for 3 or 6 months? These sort of things. If you run those scenarios and they are okay, and if you're not sure, you can go onto my website. I've got some downloadable spreadsheets that you can actually pump in the numbers and just see how it all works and comes together. Or just call the team and ask them, and they can sort of run through very briefly. But that should give you a bit more confidence, because as much as you can, I did it today. I spent probably 2 hours on YouTube just watching other commentators And really I went deep and dirty today. Like, it was dark. I mean, the world is coming to the end. The Greatest Depression, worse than the Greatest Depression. Get out of everything and just buy gold, or I mean, that's how you can go dark. And there's a lot of that out, and a lot of that. And the problem is that's getting lots of views. There's not this balanced approach, which is much more of what I prefer to do. Okay, so look, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And just make sure you're getting yourself into a position that, things are going to slow down, I think, over the next 6 months. And it will probably reveal itself in the next 6 to 9 months, and we'll see what happens there. But I think, it could go down. I don't think it's necessarily going to go down that much, So Andy just said, currently have a repayment mortgage on my rental property yielding 3%. Can I simply click onto the interest-only mortgage that will see me at 7% yield once my current fixed term ends? So you're at 3% yield. So 3%, that's obviously with your repayments coming out. Yeah, okay, gotcha. Whereas if it's an interest only at 7%, 7% is actually not a bad yield. Can you just click onto it? No, you can't just click onto it. Unfortunately, with the lending restrictions that have been brought in with the mortgage market review back in 14, I think, or 14, I think it was 16 maybe when it was come into effect. But anyway, whenever it was. It's not just a simple move over to interest only. You're probably more likely they'll want you to know what repayment mechanism you got, okay? And that's one of the key things now, that you've got to know how you're going to pay this mortgage back, all right? So so hopefully that helps, Andy. Feed is pixelated. That's not good. Okay. I'm not sure what to do about that. That's on YouTube, okay? Hopefully it picks up. Hopefully it's just a short-term thing. Just tell me again if it stays that way. I'm not really sure. But yeah, anyway, we'll move on. Good. So, I think one of the key things here with this whole game is, you've got to get personal, you've got to get local, and you've got to work out how it will affect you. And that's the preparation you need to do now. If you do the preparation now, then you can pretty much stay away from the dark, internet YouTubers, and even the positive guys who are saying, no, buy big, buy, that's more of a sales pitch. I'm more, as I said, -3, and I think it's more of a 0 to -10%. In fact, +3% to -10% is the range I see places, going in for the next year. We'll see, So house prices rant. I mean, house prices, look, they're all over the news, and it's scary to think that our industry seems to have been put down to house prices, and that's pretty much it. But the interesting thing is house prices have hit a record high, in the extraordinary coronavirus property market. It's amazing to think that that's what's happened now. But interesting, asking prices 5.5 higher than in October last year. The average asking price now stands at 323,530. That's pretty interesting to see that. I was expecting it to have slowed down by now, and I know that it is heading that direction. Okay, so don't think for a minute that it's going to be, this will continue. My assumption would be that it should have already started to come off, but there's obviously a lot of pent-up demand still in the market. And that is, as I've been saying, austerity layered with Brexit that's kept the market down, which means that house prices haven't really expanded. And so there's this pent-up demand in the market. And obviously that's bigger than what most people thought. That may see us through. I mean, I think it's going to see us through any big drops that you might see in other countries, because I think other countries are more at risk than the UK. Okay, so we'll see. So I just saw this. This is annual house price changes in London. Now, interestingly, those red places are up to, the deep red is 7%, the deep blue is -7%. But that's the sort of range, 7 to 7. And this is London, okay, which is quite interesting. So most people would be saying right now that London hasn't grown, that London's done nothing. And you can see those central areas. So it's really the zone 1 and 2, which hasn't really done a lot, okay? But the other places, they've been ticking away, they've been doing okay. And that's what we're seeing. I'm quite robust, I'm quite bullish on London. I think London will bounce back. And I've said this, many times, I'm now looking back into London for our investors. And if they're really concerned, then they can look for completions in 2023, that sort of thing. But there's lots going on. But as I said yesterday in my live stream, look to where the sun sets. In other words, look west, not east. And I'll explain why, and I'll show you a bit more very soon. So, mortgage availability drops to 10-year low. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is because there's going to be an almighty drop next year. This is rubbish, okay? This is not the reason. The reason is because if you think about it, you have a business that's this big, and then you have austerity, and it becomes this big. And then you have Brexit, and it becomes this big. So you might have you might have 10 underwriters working for you. If all of a sudden you lend a product and you get hundreds of people applications in, you turn that product off until you can process those, and then maybe you open it up. Or you go, I've got 100 applications, but I can only fill 20, so I'm going to pick the very best. So I'm going to change my criteria to be the very top, the people that we want to lend to that are basically certain bets. Yeah, low loan to value, high income, that sort of stuff. Those sort of guys. That's the natural reaction, and that is what's happening now with the mortgages. It is not because they're afraid that there's going to be a massive drop. The banks have huge fundings, they've got huge liquidity, there's lots of that into the market. Yeah. So I think, at the end of the day, people are being told the wrong thing, which is, oh yeah, the banks know something that we don't. Don't get into property because it's going to have a massive drop. Look what they're doing, tightening. Naturally, they will tighten with uncertainty. Yeah, they don't want to take the risks. You know what? But they're happy to lend 90, 95% because it's business. If they can make a profit out of it, absolutely. And of course, they price in the risk. They're very good at that. The highest paid people in mortgages are actuaries that work out the numbers and work out the interest rates. And having come from that industry, I know that industry really, really well. So for me, this is not an issue with them predicting something that might happen. It is the natural course of business. Number one is they haven't got enough staff to fulfill that, good qualified experienced staff that know their product. And number two is that because we're potentially going to more risk, they're pricing that risk in, or they're pricing the people out through the criteria. So James just said, if income's not high enough in relation to house prices in the UK, why do you believe prices in London look, okay, so this is a great question actually. I'm going to put that on the screen. I should have been doing this before. So why do I think affordability is a problem or why do I normally think affordability is a problem? Affordability is a problem to a degree, because if you go back 30 years, I keep mentioning 30 years ago when I learned economics, but this is reality. Affordability was a big issue because basically your income was the sole way you got money. But what's happening now is parents are lending. You can get other types of debt and that sort of stuff. You've got other ways of making money. You can have side jobs, all these sort of things. So a lot of the sort of standard way that we used to view things is not the way that we view them now. Okay, and so London is one of those places where people will work stupid hours. People will they'll do and I say stupid hours. People will do what they need to do to get what they need to get, and that means buying property and all this sort of stuff. So I think London house prices are 17 times incomes, which is ridiculous. But when you consider anywhere else in the world, a world city, it's not that ridiculous. And to be fair, a lot of people rent in London. So so for me, it's not a case of this is going to be the death nail, and it's the market can't keep going, it has to come down. Actually, prices will continue to go up just as incomes will continue to go up. I mean, the interesting thing is we're still not accounting for the fact that there is a lot of tech people now in London, that used to be bankers, and I'm not saying the same people have now become tech people, but a whole new breed of people have come in tech. And tech is very different in the way they're paid, but it's not the same, but it's different. But there's a lot more tech now coming, and it's a massive growth area, and that's not just that, that's everything. London is vibrant. London's happening, and sure, we might look down the streets now and not see a lot of people, but it will come back, and we've seen that happen where I am in Singapore. I've seen it happen, so yeah, for me, it's not the be all and end all. It is a determination, affordability, but it's not if the affordability is this, it has to come down. We've proven that many, many times that that's not the case. So the other side with affordability is the first-time buyers, low deposits fall sharply. Yeah, and again, this is exactly the same reason. Why lend to first-time buyers who are inherently risky when you don't have to? Yeah, so basically, this is the sign of the times. It's what people do. It's that is normal. There's nothing untoward with that. Yeah, so. Look, guys, I think there's a lot of media and a lot of stuff going on that we're being told right now that isn't actually reflective of reality and the real reasons why things are happening. Now, sure, there is inherent risk right now that we may drop, but then that's what I've been saying for a while, buy in the best areas because they're the places of rebound, and that way, for me, anytime you say I'm not buying in this market, what you're saying is I don't understand this market. But the problem is there's always an excuse as to why not to buy. Yeah. So what you've got to do is get rid of that excuse and work out how to buy in that market and hedge your best, mitigate your risk, that sort of thing. That's actually really what you need to be doing. Okay. Good. So let's get on to London property hotspots rant. Now, so this is sort of, you'll probably hear a lot more about London now because, to be fair, I'm back on London again. And if you think this kind of feels like it did back in 2010, where we were sort of on the other side of the recession and things were coming out, it was still pretty shaky, and people were like, oh, London, don't know about these areas. And we're investing in places like Woolwich, which at that stage people were like, what? Or Kidbrooke Village. I mean, but when you look at it, and on the live stream yesterday I showed a graph, people who bought in those things back then have doubled their money. In 8 years, or I think it's 9 years, they doubled their money. That's what it feels like now in some of these areas. But the interesting thing is, and this is what I find, the problem and why you've got to get good advice, where to buy in London 2020. Now, this is a March article, okay? So this is March, I granted, but they're saying Barking Riverside. You know what? We were buying there 5 years ago, Greenwich Peninsula 6-7 years ago, Woolwich, 2010, 2009 even, Poplar, 2007, 2008, so they're saying these are the places to buy, look, I get it, now the interesting thing is when I look at this map, this is the map that they're saying, look at these 18 hotspots. Now, for me, I'm sitting there going, now I'm not disputing some of these hotspots. It's not about all of them. But what a lot of them are doing is they're telling you places that are already gone. So as a property investor, I want to get in before you get this growth. The problem with these articles is they wait until after this happens, and then they say, oh, look at this place. It's a great happening place. And it's like, that's too late. That's when all your homeowners and all your renters move in there. And that's when your rental demand goes up. And look, I love that. That's exactly what we want to happen. But as an investor, I want to get in before that. When these articles come out, I look at them and go, you're 5 years too late. It's like, it's ridiculous. But that is the nature of that. Now, let me show you my map to combat with that. Now, it hasn't got 18 places, but, it's interesting. If you look at Woolwich there, Woolwich is right on the east side, and it's the orange dot, but it's actually not the orange dot. The orange dot is Thamesmead. So what's happened now is Woolwich is pretty much built now. There's still opportunities there. It's a great place. Fundamentals are fantastic, Crossrail. But actually, if you move further out, you've got Thamesmead. You've also got further out in the north and west, you've got Slough, Watford, Enfield, and a number of places like that are having stuff happening. And I think this is one of the things with commuter towns. One thing that coronavirus is doing is it's actually getting us to commute, and commuting is going to be more, certainly for families. I think for singles, London's still going to be, living in the centre is still going to be the way to do it, and and the still thing that you want to do. But the interesting thing is, if we come into the middle, if you look smack bangers in the middle there, you've got White City. That's Earls Court. Now amazing Earls Court, White City, that sort of area, massive growth area there. Heaps happening. It basically used to be, old commercial brownfield sites that now are turning into beautiful residential stuff. That's what happens when you put, investment in. So, but it is pricey, so you're putting 600-700 grand for a 1-bedroom flat now. And for a 2-bedroom flat, you're looking at 800-900, maybe over $1 million, that sort of stuff, so that will happen. But, then you've got these places like, for instance, Brent Cross. Brent Cross, I think, is $5 billion being spent on it. Southall, 3,750 properties going into it. You've got that. Brent Cross is there, £5 billion, Brent Cross Town. A massive, massive regen program, 6,700 new homes, And all this is happening, and yet there's very little about it. Yeah, there's very little about it because it's only, this was only just announced, Brent Cross. Argent was, I think, the other day. It only just announced the other day. But huge opportunity going to be there. 50-acre site, maybe not in the centre of London, but certainly on the outskirts, and certainly commutable. So these are sort of places where in 5 years' time, that will be a place oh, look, live at Brent Cross. Yeah. So, we want to get in early. And that's what I'm saying now is and that's why I'm introducing London now, because I want you guys to start thinking about London as an investment. Now, obviously, if London's too much for you, don't worry, because next week what I'm going to focus on is where I think outside of London. Okay. So we'll sort of build on this, so don't feel left out if you're going, well, Brett, I can't afford London. Where do I go now? We'll get to that. Yeah. That's the sort of next week plan, But you've got also what they call a green quarter. It used to be called Southall Waterside, which is it's a massive Barclay scheme. That's the site there. Absolutely gorgeous. We've been selling there for 2 years, 3, and actually amazingly, I looked. I think it was 5 years ago when we first got the site, but then they had some issues with it, and they decided to just build it out. But now, they've been selling for about 2 years. We've got our first completions on site, I think, in January. First buildings. Awesome opportunity. I mean, a massive, opportunity there. And this is the sort of stuff when you get in early enough. What happens is, it's looking, it looks terrible when you first move in. The number of clients I've had go out to a place, and then all of a sudden what happens is they're sitting there going, Brett, I got off the train and I felt like I was going to get murdered or, axed to death, and then it's like, okay, great. But think about it in 5 years' time when all this is finished, what it's going to look like. And invariably they go back 5 years later and they're like, my goodness, this has totally changed. And that's the massive regeneration. And this is happening all over London right now. And not only London, but places like Manchester and in fact, a lot of the major cities that are capturing the investment market, okay? The problem is it's not happening everywhere, okay? And guys, any questions you've got, chuck them into the comment section. I'll be happy to answer them. If you're not watching live, then you can always email webinars@gladfish.com and I'll come back to you with the answer on video. So you've got either option. Good. So I just want to finish off with, because this is an interesting one, service accommodation. Now, for a long time, we had this Airbnb and the service accommodation, and everyone was, this is fantastic and wonderful, and selling them as, pre-let things. Sorry, I'll jumped ahead. But, and the challenge right now is that a lot of these have been decimated. Yeah, a lot of these, they just aren't renting. A lot of these are sitting there. So we're getting a lot of service apartments that are coming back onto the buy-to-let market. Now, this is doing two things, okay? Number one, it means that on some buildings where there's been 20 or 30 apartments that have been on Airbnb that are now coming back onto the long-term market, the rentals are dropping because they're desperate. They've had 3, 4, 5, 6 months of no rent and they've had to pay the mortgage. And that's disappointing, yeah? So, so this has been happening a lot, and this is happening all across the UK. Plus, there's a lot more happening now with around the taxing of, and really, forget the taxing, because the tax has always been there. It's about equalising the playing field. So hotels versus Airbnbs, and they're effectively equalising that, and I think they've successfully lobbied that that's what they need. So it's going to become less and less profitable now. I've got some mates who do service apartments, and they're doing well as can be, I'll say. Not as well as they were, but they're surviving. But they've had to pivot to certain things. And I think that's one of the keys, is that if you haven't pivoted, and if you're still waiting for things to come back, you might want to consider a long-term let, okay? It's not it's not the things that you've been, or the money that you've been used to, but at least you're getting some money in, yeah? But that has had a negative effect, especially in London. Especially in London where you've got lots of service apartments. Airbnb really hasn't been massive. There is a bit of a market there for it, but it's not just Airbnb, it's the service accommodation, it's the corporate company lets and things like that, market that's stopped because people are working from home. But in terms of lettings and management as well. So what I want to do is just want to quickly talk, 1 in 6 people would put an offer on a property after virtual viewings. And this is just to warn you guys, okay? And that warning is simply this, is that right now, the traditional way things have been done is that people go and do viewings. Now what we're going to start to see is people are requiring you to have a virtual viewing of your place. So whether that be a dollhouse whether that'll be a virtual work through. I mean, what a lot of agents now, they're doing virtual walkthroughs. So they're actually walking through with their phone and showing people around, live. So they're not actually turning up. For me, that's great. But what I would be doing right now is, as a tenant leaves, I mean, look, if you've got a tenant and your place is furnished and they keep it in immaculate condition, then by all means go and do that, or get permission for them to do it now. But in the changeover, what I would suggest is you get somebody in there and do a virtual tour, a 360-degree tour. And I think if you do that, I think I just got told that I got stuffed up, did I? Sorry, guys. Yeah. So, guys, that slide says East London. It is actually West London, not East. Yeah, thanks, James. My stuff up on that one. So coming back to that, yeah. So bottom line, virtual viewings now and 360-degree tours and things like that, you should be looking to get that happening. So for all the guys that we manage, we're going to be looking at, on the changeover, start implementing that so that we can start holding it on our website and people can do viewings. And that way you take out that, that need to actually, show people through and spend a huge amount of time and energy, on that. And also showing people that don't actually, really want it in the end. If they can go through and make a decision, and then the final viewing is the one where they make the decision, that actually works a lot better. So get ready for those, virtual viewings. I think, that is going to happen. Yeah, good one. So the Undertaker just said, do you think housing Armageddon is going to Stoke? Are you talking Stoke-on-Trent, or are you talking Stoke as in Stoke in the fire? Look, do I think the housing Armageddon? I think if you're in an area, if you're in a small town, and this is one so little distinction, if you're in a small town where there's only one employer or a large employer, and we had this in, I'm trying to think where it was, but we had where a large employer employed a lot of people, and what happened, they went under at the last recession, and so basically rents and everything, it caused the housing Armageddon because they took out a lot of the things. That could happen. Do I think that there's going to be a massive drop, Armageddon, all this sort of stuff? I don't for the UK. I'm not as confident in some other countries. I think, their housing market has been jacked up. And then it just depends on how their governments operate and respond, But I don't think so. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. I think there's a lot of interest in property. There's a lot of people who haven't been getting on the ladder and are willing to. So as long as we can get them a means to get it, where like a 95% mortgage where they save 5%, over at least 6 months, something like that, then I think actually we may, I think we'll see drops. I think things are going to slow down over Christmas. Certainly with the new lockdown, we're not allowed to call it a lockdown, whatever it is, the multi-tier approach to whatever, or what do they call it? They're calling it circuit breaker. Well, they call it circuit breaker here, whatever. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't think we're going to see Armageddon. Yeah. Do I think there is a risk that could happen worldwide? Yeah, I think there is. Absolutely. There's certainly a case for that, as I said at the start of the thing. But do I think it's going to happen? Not really. I don't think we're going to see that as bad as that. Okay. But yeah. I'll just show you this too. So this is next week. So next week we've got the normal news one we do on Wednesdays at 12:30. So that's still there. On Tuesdays for the next 6 more weeks, I've just done one yesterday. We're having a special round, autumn series of property investor webinars. And this one is King, Queen, Landlord or Pawn, making the new property world order, making of the new property world order or opportunity to thrive. And this is some of they're basically what these webinars are. They're subjects that I'm interested in, I've been chatting about and I've been doing research on, and they're just concepts that I'm building in my mind. But not only me, but actually they're people the guys I chat to, and the general move in things. And so one of that is that what we're finding is, if you look at historically, you had kings, queens, landlords, and all the plebs or the peasants or the pawns or whatever you want to call them, And so the reality is with those, my personal thing is that's not the case anymore. We've now seen a middle class evolve, but we're now seeing that middle class actually get pressed down. And what we're seeing is billionaires and corporations, landlords, and then what I'm saying is pawns, And the question is, where do you want to sit? And we're going to look at that subject, and we're going to actually look at ways that you can make sure that you're on that landlord class, the new world order, if you like, or the new old world order, and that may sound ominous and all that sort of stuff, but to be fair, that is the way that things have been heading. And I've been saying this for a long time, but we're going to look into the details of it and sort of see how we can overcome that and make sure that us and our family are fine. And I think that's really, really important. Guys, is there any other questions? I saw it was Stoke-on-Trent. It was Stoke-on-Trent. Good. So look, Stoke-on-Trent, as I've said before, my family's from Stoke-on-Trent. Do I think, look, the problem I have with Stoke-on-Trent is population is not massive. There's not huge investment going in there. So at a small level, yes, fine. But is it is Stoke-on-Trent, a new world city, a future world city, that sort of stuff? Not really. It hasn't captured the investment market there. So, so it's one of those areas where what you'll see is a lot of people that good brains that start there will move into the major cities, and that's that's the trend now, that, the brain drain away from these sort of places. Is it going to happen now? No, not necessarily. It's probably still got some time, but it could in the near future, or over the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think unless the government finds a way to really get investment out into those suburbs and into those minor cities and towns, the house prices are not going to continue to grow, as they haven't for a lot of those areas. The last 10 years has seen, very little growth at all, including in Stoke. We haven't seen massive growth in house prices. Look, it's ticked along, it hasn't, dropped, but it certainly hasn't doubled in price, and that's unfortunately for the majority of areas in the UK, not just Stoke. Yeah. Unless it's a major city like a Manchester or Birmingham or, Liverpool, maybe Leeds, and, but even Leeds, hasn't really doubled yet, but Leeds has got a lot happening certainly in the city centre there with HS2, if that ever happens, because it's becoming so expensive to do it. But guys, if there's no other questions, I haven't seen any other questions come up. That's it for this week. So have a fantastic week, and I'll be monitoring everything and making sure that I bring the news to you same time next week. But if you want to, you're more than welcome to sign up. You can go to you just go to gladfish.com/webinars. I forgot to put that in there, and sign up to that webinar series, and you'll get invited to all the webinars over the next. So we've got the next 6 weeks basically until the 1st of December, and there's a whole range of different subjects there. So I'm really enjoying doing those webinars because it's stuff that I love talking about, and it's sort of a lot of it is property, and it's related to property, but it's more left of field or right of field where you sort of go, that's not normally what property guys talk about, but it is what property guys think about. Certainly if they're thinking long-term investment and things like that. So guys, thank you very much for listening. Any questions, if you're not on the live stream and you want to send anything in, webinars@gladfish.com, or else get in contact with me on the various social media channels, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Otherwise, be sure to subscribe and comment, and please press the like button, and we'll chat real soon. We'll talk to you later. Cheers guys, bye.